I woke up with chalk dust on my tongue, 17 exhausted teenagers staring at me, and a red dismissal order burning cold in my hand. That was my first clue, that I was not where I was supposed to be. My second clue was the memory of dying in a city hospital bed on Earth, surrounded by the sour smell of disinfectant and the soft beeping of a machine that had already given up on me. My third clue was the man standing at the front of the classroom in silver academy robes, smiling like he had personally invented disappointment. "Mentor Noor Alaris," he said, loud enough for every student to hear. "Age 32, temporary instructor of the failed disciple hall. By order of Dean Corvan, your entire class will be expelled in 30 days unless they pass the annual sect examination." That was when the memories hit. Not mine. Hers. Noor Alaris, 32, outer academy instructor, low-ranked cultivator, no noble sponsor, no family clan behind her, no impressive spiritual root, no political protection. The kind of woman important men ignored until they needed someone to blame. And now I was her. A transmigrator. In a cultivation academy where teenagers were expected to breathe moonlight into their meridians, balance spiritual pressure in their cores, and somehow become disciplined vessels of the heavens by sitting still until their knees went numb. Very educational, extremely scientific, totally not a disaster factory. The classroom was long, drafty, and miserable. Faded talisman strips curled from the ceiling beams. 6 cracked meditation mats had been patched with rope. The incense burner in the corner was cold. The students looked like they had not slept properly in months. Most wore gray practice robes, the lowest color in the academy. A few had sleeves too short for their wrists. One boy had a bruise yellowing beneath his left eye. One girl kept rubbing her fingertips together, as if checking whether they still had feeling. And all of them were under my care. The dismissal order was written on spirit paper edged in red. 30 days, annual examination, minimum class average of 60, individual stability score above 40. Failure meant expulsion, confiscation of dormitory resources, reassignment of the hall, and removal of the acting instructor. The silver-robed man was Deputy Registrar Pell. He was not the villain. He was worse in some ways. He was a clerk who enjoyed being useful to powerful people. Behind him, through the open classroom door, I saw the real problem. Dean Corvan. Tall, elegant, gray hair tied with a jade clasp, a calm face, soft eyes, the kind of man who could ruin a life while sounding like he was discussing tea prices. He did not enter the classroom. He did not need to. He stood in the corridor with 2 senior instructors and his nephew, Dean Corvan, a round-faced young man in expensive blue robes who kept staring past me toward the dormitory wing behind the hall. Not at the students. At the building. Noor's memories told me why. The failed disciple hall was considered worthless, but its dormitory budget was not. 30 students' annual maintenance allowance, heating stones, rice talismans, spirit lamp oil, beginner pill vouchers, training yard fees, the kind of budget nobody respected until someone wanted to steal it. Dean Corvan wanted the hall emptied, so his nephew could convert the dormitory into a noble supplementary cultivation annex. Meaning private rooms, better resources, a comfortable title, and a river of academy funds redirected through family hands. I looked down at the dismissal order again. 30 days. 17 students. 1 failed hall. 1 corrupt dean. And me, a dead teacher from Earth, trapped inside the body of a woman everyone thought was too weak to object. The funny thing was, in my old life, I had spent 12 years teaching students who had been called slow, lazy, hopeless, distracted, difficult, behind, weak, and not academic. I knew what people said when they did not know how to teach. I knew the difference between inability and confusion. I knew what happened when you gave vague advice to beginners and called their failure a moral flaw. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that these students had not failed cultivation. They had been badly taught. Deputy Registrar Pell, dropped a wooden stamp onto my desk. "Sign acceptance of the order," he said, "or resign." The teenagers lowered their eyes. Not one of them expected me to fight. Noor Alaris had spent 3 years being polite, underfunded, and overlooked. Her predecessor had resigned after 6 weeks. The one before him had vanished into a mountain post and never returned his teaching seal. I picked up the stamp. Dean Corvan's nephew smiled. So I smiled back. Not widely, not bravely, just enough. Then I stamped the order. The red spirit paper flashed once and sealed itself to my name. Pell looked almost disappointed that I had not begged. Dean Corvan finally stepped into the doorway. "A sensible choice, Mentor Noor. The Academy appreciates instructors who understand reality." I folded the dismissal order once, then twice. "My students will sit the examination," I said. A few heads snapped up. Corvan's smile warmed by half a degree, which made it colder somehow. "Of course," he said, "all Academy rules will be followed." That was his first mistake. Because in my old life, whenever an administrator said rules would be followed, I knew 2 things. First, someone had been breaking them. Second, they had forgotten that rules could be used by people who read carefully. Noor Alaris's body was tired in a way that felt old, even though she was only 32. Her shoulders ached from carrying record bundles between halls. Her right wrist had a tiny tremor from too many hours copying assessment scrolls by hand. Her core held enough spiritual energy to light a candle, maybe boil a cup of water if the cup was feeling generous. The students knew that. The entire academy knew that. In Silver Branch Cultivation Academy, rank was everything. Students were divided by hall. Noble class wore blue, inner preparation wore white, martial disciples wore bronze, support artisans wore green, failed disciple hall wore gray because apparently humiliation had a uniform. Cultivation here had 3 beginner measures. Gathering, which meant pulling spiritual energy into the body. Circulation, which meant moving it through meridians without tearing yourself apart. Manifestation, which meant using that energy outside the body in a controlled way. Every instructor talked about them like sacred mysteries. They used phrases like "listen to the breath of heaven," "become the empty cup," and "align your soul with the unseen river." Beautiful poetry. Terrible lesson design. The annual examination tested 5 things: stillness, flow control, pressure tolerance, spell stability, and team formation response. Each section gave 100 points. Noble class students practiced with private tutors, spirit-assisted cushions, pulse-calming pills, and family manuals older than some kingdoms. My students had cracked maths and anxiety. Noor's memories showed me the pattern. Failed hall students were not all untalented. Most had one severe weakness: poor breath rhythm, panic under pressure, weak visualization, bad proprioception, overactive meridians, slow gathering speed, too much strength and no control, no strength and too much control. Different problems, same punishment. The academy treated them as one category: failures. That night, after Pell and Corvan left, I stayed in the classroom with the 17 students. Nobody spoke. Rain tapped against the paper windows. Somewhere outside, a bell rang 5 times for evening meditation. The students flinched at the sound like it had insulted them personally. I set the dismissal order on the desk. "Names," I said. They stared at me. A broad-shouldered boy in the back frowned. "You know our names." "No," I said. "Mentor Noor knew the names written on your files. I want the ones attached to actual human beings." That made them nervous. Good, nervous was better than hopeless. One by one, they answered. Tavin, 17, strong arms, unstable output. Myra, 16, fast gathering, frequent headaches. Saul, 15, could not maintain stillness past 40 breaths. Jessa, 18, excellent theory, frozen manifestations. Rull, 17, overcirculated until his palms shook. Nemi, 14, youngest, afraid of being watched. Oren, 16, poor memory for forms. Sella, 17, spirit root damaged during a fever. Vey, 15, copied everyone and understood nothing. Bram, 19, repeated twice, angry enough to crack stones and soft enough to hide it. There were more, 17 in total. The last was Irene. He sat near the cracked window, thin and quiet, with black hair falling into his eyes. His file memory floated up in Noor's mind. Age 17, scores below average in every formal test, no standout technique, often accused of lack of initiative. But when the others spoke, Irene watched their hands. When I moved the dismissal order, his eyes followed the seal, not the paper. When rainwater leaked through the window frame, he shifted his mat 3 inches before the first drop fell. Observation skills. Interesting. After the introductions, I asked each student to demonstrate the first breathing cycle. They looked horrified. Here, Myra asked. Yes. Now. That is usually what here implies. Bram snorted once, then covered it with a cough. They began. Within 10 seconds, I understood the crime committed against them. Not legally, not yet. Pedagogically. Their techniques were a museum of bad instruction. Tavin inhaled like he was trying to swallow a storm. Saul counted too fast, panicked, then restarted from 1 with every mistake. Myra gathered energy beautifully, then shoved it upward until pressure spiked behind her eyes. Nemi's shoulders locked whenever she felt watched. Roll's circulation route crossed an inflamed meridian every 3rd pass. Oren forgot step 4 because step 3 had never made sense to him in the first place. They did not need inspiration. They needed diagnostics. The moment I thought that, blue light flickered at the edge of my vision. A translucent panel opened in the air. No one else reacted. I went very still. At the top of the panel, neat white letters appeared. Lesson planning interface initialized. Current instructor, Noor Alaris. Class group, failed disciple hall. Function, confusion tracking, practice design, feedback mapping. Limitations, cannot cultivate for students, cannot guarantee outcomes, cannot alter talent, resources, or examination conditions, requires direct observation. Accuracy improves with repeated evidence. I stared at it. Then I laughed once under my breath, because apparently even transmigration had given me educational software. Not a sword, not a dragon bloodline, not a heavenly flame. A lesson planner. Honestly fitting. The panel listed the students with small symbols beside their names. Red for severe confusion, yellow for unstable skill, gray for insufficient data. Beside Tavin, misidentified effort as force. Beside Myra, strong gathering, unsafe pressure release. Beside Saul, working memory overload during breath count. Beside Nemi, performance anxiety interrupts circulation. Beside Irene, low output, high perceptual accuracy, underassessed. I closed my eyes briefly. The tool was not magic in the way people wanted magic to be. It did not hand me answers. It did not make the students stronger. It did not tell me the future. It simply showed confusion like a map. In my old life, that would have been enough. I looked at 17 teenagers who had been told they had 30 days before the world threw them away. New rule, I said. No one in this room is allowed to call themselves untalented for the next 30 days. Bram leaned back, and if we are untalented, then congratulations, I said. You are about to become very annoying evidence. The first thing I did was cancel meditation. That nearly caused a riot. Not from the students, from the academy. At Silver Branch, beginner cultivation began with 2 hours of dawn stillness, 1 hour of noon circulation, and 3 hours of evening contemplation. Students sat on mats, breathed, failed silently, and were blamed for not understanding instructions nobody had actually broken down. The next morning, my 17 students arrived before sunrise expecting the same punishment with a new witness. Instead, I had moved every mat into a wide circle and drawn chalk lines across the floor. What is this? Tavin asked. A classroom. It was already a classroom. No, it was a room where people sat in rows and suffered. That is different. The private interface hovered at the edge of my sight, waiting. I divided cultivation into skills. Breath packing, sensation recognition, meridian mapping, energy gathering, release control, recovery, partner observation, error correction. The students looked at me as if I had started carving a roast duck with a ruler. Cultivation to them was sacred, difficult, mystical, something masters transmitted through riddles and expensive tea. I respected the mystery. I just did not worship vagueness. On day one, we did not cultivate for power. We learned what 10 breaths felt like. Only 10. I made them place one hand below the ribs and one hand over the lower core. I had them inhale for 4 counts, pause for 2, exhale for 6. No spiritual energy, no meridian flow, no heavenly river, just breath. Bram muttered, "This is baby training." "Excellent," I said. "Bobbies learn faster than embarrassed teenagers." That earned one actual laugh from Sella. We practiced in sets of 3, then stopped, then repeated. Spaced repetition, not spiritual punishment, short cycles, immediate feedback, rest before collapse, revisit before forgetting. By the end of the first hour, Saul completed 10 breaths without restarting. That was milestone 1. Tiny, invisible, completely unimpressive to anyone who did not know what failure had looked like yesterday. But Saul's eyes went wet. "I did 10, he whispered. "Yes," I said, "and tomorrow you will do 11 badly, then 10 well again, and that will still count." The interface updated. Saul, breath count stabilized under reduced cognitive load. I wanted to hug the panel. I did not. Professional boundaries mattered, even with invisible magical software. On day 2, I tested sensory language. The academy had taught students to describe spiritual energy as pure, turbid, smooth, obedient, and resonant. Again, beautiful, useless to beginners. I asked them to describe what they actually felt. Warmth, pressure, itching, pulling, buzzing, numbness, sharpness, slow swirl, fast sparks, heavy fog, tight wire. Once they had words, they had awareness. Once they had awareness, they could adjust. Myra discovered that her headaches came from pushing gathered energy toward her brow because she thought higher meant better. Nobody had corrected her because her early gathering speed impressed instructors. They praised the visible glow and ignored the pain. I gave her a new target. Gather to the lower core, release through the palms into a bowl of water, stop before pressure rose above her throat. She frowned. "That is too simple." "Good," I said. "Simple is where accuracy lives." She tried. The bowl trembled. A single ripple crossed the surface without splashing. Her face changed. Not joy yet. Trust, maybe. The first dangerous hint of it. Myra, gathering rerouted. Pressure risk reduced. Milestone 2. On day 3, Irene stayed after class. He held a practice slate against his chest and avoided my eyes. "Mentor," he said, "Tavin's output spike is not random." I had noticed the same thing, but I said nothing. Irene swallowed. "It happens when someone stands behind his right shoulder, not left, right. I think he was struck there during correction drills." Quiet student, poor test scores, exceptional observation. "You saw that?" He nodded. "How many others have patterns?" He hesitated, then opened the slate. He had drawn 17 small seating maps, arrows, times, triggers, notes in tiny handwriting. Myra presses, tongue to teeth before headache. Saul fails when count is spoken aloud by others. Nemi improves when watching candle flame instead of instructor face. Bram pretends not to understand after public correction. My throat tightened. In my old life, I had known students like Irene. The ones who saw everything and assumed it did not count because exams only rewarded noise. "Irene," I said carefully, "would you like a job?" His head jerked up. "I can't teach." Neither can most people with titles, I said. You can observe, that is rarer. For the first time, he smiled. A small one, but real. I made him class observer, not assistant, not servant, observer. He tracked patterns while I ran practice cycles. He recorded who improved after demonstration, who needed verbal steps, who needed touch markers, who needed quiet repetition, who needed challenge, who needed safety. The interface accuracy improved each day. By day 5, we had our first visible proof. Tavin, who usually blasted uncontrolled spiritual force hard enough to crack tiles, released a thread of energy through a reed tube into a hanging bell. The bell rang once. Clear, controlled, not loud. The class froze. Tavin stared at the bell as if it had betrayed his self-image. I said, again. He did it again. Softer. Then again. Softer still. A boy built like a door had learned control through a reed tube and a bell. The academy would have called that boring. I called it the beginning of revenge. Dean Corvan noticed us on day 6. That was faster than I had hoped and slower than I expected. People in power rarely notice suffering. They notice deviation from procedure immediately. I was in the training yard with the students at dawn. We had divided the ground into 6 stations. Breath packing by the east wall, meridian mapping under the cedar, water bowl release near the well, partner observation under the shade, recovery breathing by the steps, microformation practice in the center. 17 failed disciples moved in short, focused intervals. 7 minutes practice, 2 minutes feedback, 3 minutes rest. Repeat. No one was collapsing. No one was crying behind the incense shed. No one was pretending enlightenment while secretly panicking. Naturally, this looked suspicious. Dean Corvan arrived with Leo, Deputy Registrar Pell, and 2 instructors from Noble class. The Noble instructors wore blue-trimmed robes and expressions of polite disgust. I had seen that expression at school district meetings when someone suggested helping struggling students before ranking them. Corvan watched Bram guide Nemi through a candle-focused drill. How charming, he said. The failed hall has become a nursery. The students stiffened. I clapped twice. Continue. They continued. That mattered. Corvan's eyes narrowed a fraction. You received a dismissal order, Mentor Noor, not permission to invent games. I received an order requiring my students to sit the annual examination in 30 days, I said. The order did not specify that preparation must be ineffective. Leo laughed. He was 24, according to Noor's memories, though his face had the soft confidence of someone who had never carried his own consequences. My uncle is concerned for academy standards. Generous of him. Pell frowned at my tone. Corvan stepped closer to the central station, where Tavin and Sella were practicing paired release. One sent a thread of energy into a copper ring. The other stabilized the vibration with a palm hovering 1 inch away. Beginner work. Precise work. Corvan saw only the first part. You are wasting their final month, he said. These students need breakthrough pressure, not childish repetition. That was a perfect example of a very common educational disease, mistaking stress for rigor. I smiled politely. With respect, Dean, several of them were damaged by breakthrough pressure before they had basic control. Excuses. Evidence. His gaze sharpened. The students stopped breathing in that special way children do, when adults decide whether their lives will become worse. Corvan lifted his hand and pointed at Tavin. You, demonstrate full force manifestation. Tavin went pale. Yesterday, maybe he would have obeyed. He would have blasted energy, failed to control it, cracked something, and confirmed every insult ever thrown at him. Today, he looked at me first. I shook my head once. Corvan saw it. Are you refusing a dean's instruction? I am refusing unsafe testing outside examination conditions, I said. Academy Safety Rule 14. No instructor may demand maximum output demonstration from a probationary disciple without a stabilizing array and healer present. Pell blinked. He had not expected me to know rules. That was adorable. Corvan's smile returned. You have become diligent overnight. Stress improves memory. Leo's face reddened. Failed disciples don't get to hide behind rules. Actually, I said, rules are most useful to people others want to step on. That was my warning. Corvan heard the challenge. He did not hear the danger. He looked at the 17 students, then back at me. Very well. Follow every rule. Submit daily lesson records, individual progress notes, resource logs, attendance seals, safety declarations, and training plans by sunset each day, since you are so committed to procedure. There it was. Malicious administration. A classic. Noor's memories told me daily records were required only weekly, unless a hall was under formal remediation. But because I had stamped the dismissal order, Corvan could classify us under emergency review. The intent was obvious: drown me in paperwork, exhaust me, force errors, prove negligence, expel the students cleanly. He expected me to panic. Instead, I bowed. Of course, Dean, I will document everything. He looked satisfied. He should not have. In my old life, I had survived curriculum audits, inspection binders, parent reports, special education accommodations, assessment trackers, intervention plans, department reviews, and one principal who believed color-coded spreadsheets could heal society. Dean Corvan had just ordered a teacher to keep records. That was not a punishment. That was handing me a shovel and pointing toward his buried fraud. That evening, I tested the interface's record function. It could not write documents for me. Of course not. That would have been too helpful. But when I observed a student, it logged confusion patterns. When I assigned practice, it tracked completion. When I gave feedback, it linked response to outcome. When I compared resource allocation against student need, a new tab opened. Resource entitlement versus actual distribution. I went very still. Failed Disciple Hall had been allocated 17 beginner pulse stones this quarter. We had received 6. Allocated rice talismans, 510. Received, 289. Allocated practice formation access hours, 68. Received, 12. Allocated calming incense sticks, 170. Received, 0. The interface did not accuse anyone. It simply displayed gaps. Beautiful, cold gaps. Irene found me staring at the empty incense cabinet. Mentor. I asked him, do students here ever see the resource ledgers? No. Do instructors? Only hall masters. Do deans? He looked toward the administration tower. Always. By day 7, I had 2 lesson plans. One for my students. One for Dean Corvan. Paperwork became my weapon so quietly that nobody noticed until it was too late. Every evening, I submitted exactly what Corvan demanded. Daily lesson record, individual progress note, resource log, attendance seal, safety declaration, training plan. Neat, complete, boring. Painfully boring. The kind of boring that makes guilty people careless. I did not accuse, I documented. Student Myra required calming incense due to gathering pressure headaches. None available in hall inventory despite quarterly allocation of 170 sticks. Student Tavin required stabilizing ring for output drills. 1 cracked ring available. Replacement request submitted. Student Nemi benefited from low observation practice environment. Training yard screen requested, not supplied. Student Rull showed inflammation signs in 3rd meridian branch. Healer referral submitted. Appointment delayed by 9 days due to low hall priority. Every note was educational. Every note was reasonable. Every note tied student failure to missing support. And every note was sealed under Corvan's emergency review order, which meant the administration office had to receive it, stamp it, and archive it. Pell hated me by day 10. He said so with his eyebrows. Meanwhile, the students improved. Not dramatically, not like legends. Like beginners finally taught, in a way that matched how humans learn. Day 8, we built retrieval practice into cultivation theory. No more rereading manuals until the ink blurred. I asked short questions before drills. What are the 3 signs of unsafe pressure? Where does your root tighten first? What is your recovery step after failed release? Why do we stop before collapse? They groaned, then they remembered. Day 9, we made error journals. At first, Bram refused. I already know my errors, he said. Everyone tells me. No, I said. Everyone insults your errors. That is not the same as understanding them. His jaw worked. I handed him a slate. Write what happened, what you expected, what happened instead, what you will try next. That's it. That is most of learning. He looked skeptical, but he wrote. By day 11, he had discovered that his stone shaping failed not because he lacked power, but because he changed his hand angle halfway through release. His anger had never been the problem. His inconsistency had. He corrected it, using chalk marks on his fingers. The first time he shaped a practice stone into a clean square tile, he stared at it for a full minute. Then he pretended not to care. Teenagers are very committed to ruining beautiful moments. Day 12, Sella completed a manifestation in front of 5 classmates without freezing. Her trick was speaking the steps under her breath before release. The noble class would have mocked that. I considered it a bridge. Bridges can be removed after crossing. Mocking someone for needing one is how you keep them trapped on the wrong side. Day 13. Nemi maintained a candle flame for 30 breaths while Irene stood beside her, not in front of her. Tiny adjustment. Huge result. Day 14, Rull stopped over-circulating by using a 3-bead wrist counter. Touch bead 1 for gather, bead 2 for guide, bead 3 for release. His palms stopped shaking after drills. The interface marked our class confusion level down from severe to moderate. I nearly cried. Then Corvan cut our training yard access. The notice arrived at dawn on day 15. Due to scheduling priorities, failed Disciple Hall was reassigned to unused Western Courtyard space until examination day. Unused Western Courtyard space was a poetic way to say muddy rectangle behind the laundry building. The students read the notice in silence. Rain had turned the courtyard into brown paste. The western wall leaned inward. The laundry vents blew steam that smelled like soap, wet wool, and despair. Bram crumpled the notice. I held out my hand. He gave it to me. Are we going to complain? Myra asked. No, I said. 17 faces fell. I pinned the notice to our portable board. We are going to comply. They looked at me as if I had betrayed them. So I explained. The exam includes unstable conditions, noise, audience pressure, changing spiritual currents, distractions. Noble class has polished floors and perfect incense. We have laundry, steam, mud, uneven ground, and disrespect. Tavin frowned. That sounds bad. It is bad, I said. It is also practice. So we trained in mud. Balance drills improved because slipping taught foot awareness faster than lectures. Steam made breath control harder, so breath control became stronger. Noise from laundry workers forced focus under distraction. Uneven ground exposed posture mistakes. Was it ideal? No. Was it useful? Annoyingly, yes. That was malicious compliance, lesson 1. When they give you worse conditions, turn the conditions into curriculum. Irene adapted fastest. He created a mud map showing where each student lost balance. He marked safe zones and slip zones. He noticed that Jessa performed better with background noise because silence made her self-conscious. He noticed that Bram's anger lowered when he had physical tasks before fine control. I started leaving him extra observation prompts. He started answering before I asked. By day 16, the class had become something dangerous. Not powerful. Coherent. They corrected each other without cruelty. They used shared language. They knew recovery steps. They knew when to stop. They knew what kind of feedback helped each person. A cultivation class is usually a collection of individual ambitions wearing matching robes. Mine became a learning system. That was when Leo Corvan made his mistake. He came to the muddy courtyard with 4 noble class students and a jade recording orb. "Uncle wants evidence," he said cheerfully, "for the final review." The noble students laughed at our reed tubes, bead counters, chalk marks, and mud drills. Leo pointed the orb at Myra. "Show us your water ripple trick." Myra's face went blank. I stepped forward. Leo raised a hand. "No interference, Mentor Noor, unless your students cannot perform without your coaching." A trap, public embarrassment, recorded. Old Noor would have swallowed the insult. I looked at Myra. She was trembling, but not from weakness, from memory. Too many adults watching for failure. I said, "Myra, what is your first recovery step?" She inhaled shakily. "Lower focus." "Second, release through palms." "Third, stop before throat pressure." Leo rolled his eyes. "Is this an exam or a lullaby?" Myra looked at him. Then she placed both palms over the water bowl. One ripple crossed the surface. Then another. Then 3 at once, evenly spaced, touching the edges without spilling a drop. The laughter stopped. The interface flashed. "Myra, stable release under hostile observation." Public proof milestone 1. Leo lowered the orb. I smiled. "Please send Dean Corvan the recording," I said. "I would hate for him to miss evidence." By day 17, the academy began whispering. Not loudly. Failed students improving was not yet respectable enough for loud discussion. But laundry workers talked to kitchen assistants. Kitchen assistants talked to gate attendants. Gate attendants talked to junior scribes. Junior scribes talked to everyone because scribes are the veins through which institutional gossip circulates. The rumor was simple. The failed hall had stopped looking like a graveyard. Dean Corvan responded by becoming generous. That should always terrify you. On day 18, he sent us a gift. 12 boxes of examination support materials, stamped with the dean's personal seal. Inside were advanced circulation manuals, high-grade pressure pills, and polished meditation charms. The students stared at them like starving children seeing cakes in a window. My interface did not like them. When I opened the first manual, the panel flickered. Content mismatch. Advanced route unsuitable for damaged or unstable beginner meridians. When I examined the pills, it displayed another warning. Temporary output increase likely. Stability degradation risk high. The charms were worse. External rhythm enforcement may mask self-regulation weakness during practice. Performance collapse likely when removed. In normal language, the gifts would make my students look stronger for a few days and fall apart during the actual exam. A sabotage disguised as help. Classic administrator move. I had seen Earth versions, last-minute test prep packets, motivational assemblies instead of instruction, data walls instead of intervention, expensive software no one trained teachers to use. The shape changed. The insult remained. The students waited for my decision. I closed the boxes. "We will log them." Bram looked offended. "We're not using them." "No. They're expensive. So are funerals." That ended the debate. I submitted a resource receipt that evening. 12 boxes received from Dean Corvan. Materials deemed unsuitable for current student profiles. Stored unopened pending healer and curriculum review. Advanced support rejected due to documented safety concerns. Then I requested written confirmation that Corvan wanted us to use them despite those concerns. He did not provide it. Very strange. Day 19. Pell visited with a revised examination notice. Failed hall students would be assessed in the final public slot. The worst slot. By then, judges would be tired, spectators restless, noble families impatient. The arena's spiritual arrays would be strained from dozens of prior demonstrations. Afternoon wind would cut across the west side. Everyone knew scores dipped in the final slot. Pell handed me the notice with visible pleasure. I accepted it. Thank you. His pleasure faded. You understand what this means? Yes. And I will update our training plan. He stared at me for several seconds, probably searching for the part where I begged. Poor man, denied his hobby again. After he left, I gathered the students. We have 11 days, I said. Our exam conditions changed, so our practice changes. We moved hardest drills to late afternoon. We practiced after other halls had used the yard, when spiritual residue made energy flow uneven. We trained with noise. We trained with waiting. We trained tired but never exhausted. I built stamina the way I used to build exam endurance: controlled exposure, reflection, recovery. Irene suggested we simulate judge delay. How long? I asked. He checked his slate. Noble families argue after their children perform. Last year, the average delay before final slot was 23 minutes. Everyone stared. He shrugged. I listen. Beautiful boy. We practiced waiting, 23 minutes without losing focus. That became milestone 3, sustained readiness. Most beginners could perform immediately after warm-up. Fewer could stay calm while adults wasted their time. Day 21, we had our first internal mock exam. Scores were ugly. Class average, 48. Minimum stability, 36. Expulsion standard required average 60, and individual stability over 40. The students looked crushed. I clapped once. Good. Myra stared at me. Good. Yes, now we know what breaks. We spent 2 hours analyzing failure. Not blaming, analyzing. Tavin lost output control after team transitions. Nemi's score dropped when spectators stood behind judges. Saul forgot recovery after failed manifestation. Bram overcorrected when trying to be gentle. Jessa delayed too long and ran out of time. Iren's own output remained weak, but his team response score was highest in class because he saw formation gaps before they widened. That night, Iren stayed to clean bowls. You're worried, he said. I looked at him. He added quickly, not hopeless, worried. Yes. Can we pass? I could have lied. Teachers lie sometimes. Kind lies, warm lies, lies that sound like encouragement and rot into betrayal when reality arrives. Instead, I said, not if we chase power, yes if we chase stability. He nodded slowly. Then he said, Dean Corvan wants us to chase power. Exactly. The annual examination rewarded flashy students in reputation, but the actual scoring rubric was more balanced. Control, teamwork, stability. Noble class dominated because they had resources, not because the rubric demanded spectacle. Corvan assumed we would panic and imitate nobles badly. We would not. Our hidden leverage was not the interface. It was not my earth teaching knowledge alone. It was the examination rulebook. Specifically, Appendix 4. Class promotion and hall continuity clause. Noor's memories had nearly missed it because nobody cared about failed hall, but I found it while reviewing old academy law by lamplight. If a probationary hall under dismissal order exceeded the parallel noble hall in 3 non-resource-dependent examination categories, the dismissal order triggered automatic external review. Non-resource-dependent categories included control, formation response, recovery discipline, and stability under pressure. Not raw power. Not rare technique. Not spiritual root brightness. Control, teamwork, stability. The exact things Corvan thought were boring. And external review meant auditors from the sect education council, not academy staff, not Corvan's friends, not his nephew. Auditors. Budget auditors. The dormitory fraud would not just be embarrassing. It would become evidence. On day 22, I told the class the truth. Not all of it, enough. If you pass individually, you stay, I said. If we outperform noble class in 3 stability categories, the hall cannot be closed without external review. Silence. Then Bram asked, so we don't need to beat them at being noble? No. What do we beat them at? I looked around at reed tubes, bead counters, mud maps, error journals, water bowls, chalk marks, and 17 students who had been treated like broken furniture. Being teachable, I said. The final 8 days became very quiet. Not easy, quiet. There is a kind of focus that happens when people stop hopping for miracles and start trusting process. It is not glamorous. Nobody writes ballads about revision schedules. No bard sings of sleep hygiene and targeted feedback. Their loss. Day 23, we ran formation response drills. The exam's team section required groups of 5 to stabilize a rotating pressure array. Noble students usually forced it still with raw power. Impressive, but inefficient. My students could not overpower the array, so we practiced reading it. Irene stood outside each group and called changes. Left pulse rising. Backline too tight. Myra, lower pressure. Tavin, soften. At first, they depended on him too much. So I faded him out. First he called every change, then only severe changes, then he used hand signals, then nothing. Gradual release of responsibility. A phrase from my old life, a miracle in this one. By sunset, Group 1 held the rotating array for 47 breaths. The passing mark was 30. Day 24, we practiced recovery from failure. I made them fail on purpose. They hated that. Good. Failure in training is a vaccine, tiny dose, controlled environment, build immunity before the real infection. Each student had to start a technique, interrupt it safely, name the error, recover, and restart within 12 breaths. Saul hated it most. His whole identity had been built around not making mistakes because one mistake used to erase everything. When he failed safely for the 10th time, he laughed. It came out startled and bright. Again, he said. The class cheered. Not loudly, they were still failed hall. Their joy had underdeveloped muscles. But it was there. Day 25, Corvan visited again. This time he came alone. That worried me more than his entourage. He found me reviewing resource logs under the laundry awning, while the students practiced delayed start drills in the courtyard. Rain misted the air. My sleeves were damp. My hair had escaped its pins. I probably looked exactly like a woman losing a fight to weather and bureaucracy. Corvan preferred me that way. I underestimated your stubbornness, he said. Common mistake. He smiled faintly. You realize this cannot end well for you. I disagree. Then allow me to clarify. If those students fail, you will be dismissed with them. No academy recommendation, no sect pension, no teaching seal. A woman with your cultivation level will not find another post easily. Noor's body remembered fear. Her rent, her little room behind the East Archive, her younger cousin in a border village who received half her salary, her years of swallowing insults because survival had required silence. I honored that fear. Then I let my own anger stand beside it. You are very invested in our failure, I said. His gaze cooled. I'm invested in standards. No, I said. You are invested in vacant rooms. For 1 second, the mask cracked. Tiny, beautiful. Then he chuckled. Careful, Mentor Noor. Accusations require proof. Yes, I said. That is why I prefer records. His eyes moved to the stack of daily logs. A smart man would have retreated. Corvan was smart. But greed, makes intelligent people behave like amateurs. He leaned closer. After the exam, when the hall closes, those records become administrative property. I advise you not to misplace anything before then. There it was. The threat. Also the confirmation. I met his eyes. Dean Corvan, you may want to stop putting your intentions in rooms with witnesses. His gaze flicked toward the courtyard. Irene was adjusting a copper ring 10 paces away, head lowered, invisible as usual. Corvan dismissed him immediately. Second mistake. After Corvan left, Irene came to me. I heard, he said. I know. You wanted me to. Yes. He nodded. No drama, no heroic vow, just a quiet student understanding exactly where to stand. Day 26, I made copies. Not illegal copies. Certified instructional duplicates, allowed under emergency review rules because the dean himself had demanded daily submission. Each record existed in 3 places: administration archive, instructor working file, and student progress portfolio. Portfolios were considered student property. Corvan had forgotten that. We spent that evening assembling them. Each student placed their error journals, progress charts, resource notes, practice logs, and reflection seals into gray folders. At first, they treated the folders like trash, then slowly like proof. Nemi pressed her palm over hers and whispered, "This says I improved." Yes. It says how. Yes. Her eyes lifted. No one ever wrote how before. I had to look away for a moment. Because that is the thing about teaching. People think it is delivering knowledge. Sometimes it is simply leaving evidence that a child was not imagining their own effort. Day 27, our second mock exam average reached 62. Lowest stability score, 42. Barely enough. Dangerously enough. Day 28, noble class demonstrated in the central arena for sponsors. We watched from the upper shadows. They were good, I will not lie for satisfaction. Their robes shimmered with protective thread. Their cores glowed bright. Their sword-light arcs were clean. Their families applauded before techniques even landed. Leo stood near them, basking in reflected superiority despite contributing nothing but blood relation. But I watched closely. So did Irene. Noble class was powerful, but brittle. One student lost focus when applause came too early. Another overpowered a pressure array instead of harmonizing with it. Their team formation had hierarchy, not cooperation. Their recovery after mistakes was slow because they were not used to mistakes being allowed. Irene leaned close and whispered, "They don't know how to fail." No, they did not. And in 3 days, under public examination pressure, that was going to matter. Day 29, I ended training early. The students objected, which told me how far they had come. Bram said, "We need more practice." "No," I said, "you need consolidation." That sounds fake. It is real and annoying. We cleaned the hall, repaired robe hems, packed water, reviewed recovery steps once, then stopped. At sunset, I found Irene sitting by the cracked window where I had first seen him. He handed me a folded slate. "What is this?" "Observation plan for exam day," he said. "Not for me, for you." I opened it. He had mapped likely judge positions, wind direction, arena light, waiting area noise, noble class fatigue pattern, and our students' personal triggers. At the bottom, he had written one line. "If you forget everything else, remind us we have already practiced the hard parts." My chest tightened. "You know," I said, "in my old world, you would have made an extraordinary teacher." He looked embarrassed. "I have poor scores." So did half the best teachers I knew. He smiled down at his hands. Not quite romance, not exactly family, something gentler and harder to name, a trust built in small observations. On day 30, the annual academy examination began. The arena at Silver Branch Academy, was designed to make children feel small. That was my professional opinion. It was a wide circular platform carved from white stone, with 8 bronze pillars around the edge and tiered viewing galleries rising behind them. Sect elders sat beneath blue canopies. Noble families occupied cushioned seats. Instructors gathered by hall. Students waited in marked zones like offerings to an educational beast. At the far end, 3 examination judges sat behind a long table of black jade. Behind them hung the scoring mirror. Public, merciless, very shiny. Failed Disciple Hall was assigned final slot, as promised. We arrived at 9th bell. We performed at 4th afternoon bell. That meant 7 hours of waiting. Corvan wanted them exhausted. We had practiced waiting. My students sat in 2 rows beneath the west wall, gray robes clean but faded, hands resting on knees. No expensive charms, no pressure pills, no advanced manuals, just reed tubes, bead bracelets, chalk marks hidden inside sleeves, and 30 days of knowing what to do when things went wrong. Noble class performed 3 slots before us. They were dazzling. Raw power scores high, manifestation brightness high, sword aura clarity high. The gallery applauded. Leo practically glowed. Then came the rotating pressure array. The first noble group forced it still in 9 breaths. Huge power, low harmony. Score, 71. Good, not unbeatable. Second group lost formation when one student surged ahead for a prettier finish. Score, 68. Third group recovered badly after a pulse reversal. Score, 64. Their overall class average remained high because raw power carried them. But in non-resource categories, the gap opened. Control, 72. Team formation response, 68. Recovery discipline, 61. Stability under pressure, 69. Respectable. Vulnerable. Irene stood beside me, face unreadable. Corvan approached during the delay before our slot. He looked relaxed now. The arena had warmed, the arrays were strained, the judges tired. Spectators murmured. A noble baby had been crying for 10 minutes. Wind pushed dust across the platform. Perfectly miserable. Mentor Noor, Corvan said softly. No one would blame you for withdrawing 6 students. Meaning, surrender quietly and perhaps I will only ruin you a little. I adjusted my sleeve. My students are ready. His smile thinned. For expulsion, perhaps. I looked at him then. Really looked. He was not a monster from a storybook. No horns, no cursed aura, no dramatic scar. Just a man who had found a way to profit from other people's low expectations and called it leadership. Dean Corvan, I said, you are free to underestimate us until the mirror stops you. He laughed under his breath. Then the bell rang. Failed Disciple Hall, called the chief judge. Enter. 17 gray-robed students walked onto the white stone arena. The gallery rustled. Someone laughed. Bram's fists tightened once, then opened. Good. First test, stillness. 100 breaths under spiritual pressure, while the bronze pillars released alternating waves. This had broken them for years. Not today. Saul closed his eyes and counted in groups of 10, not 100. Nemi fixed her gaze on the shadow beneath the judge's table instead of the crowd. Myra lowered pressure whenever warmth rose toward her throat. Rull touched bead 1, bead 2, bead 3, then rested. One by one, the pillars pulsed. The students swayed. They did not break. Score, class average 74. The gallery quieted. Second test, flow control. Each student guided a visible thread of spiritual energy through a glass spiral without cracking it. Tavin stepped forward. A few noble students snickered. His reputation had arrived before him. He inhaled for 4, paused for 2, exhaled for 6. Then he sent a thread of energy into the spiral. Not a blast. A thread. It curved once, twice, 3 times soft as silk. The glass did not crack. Score, 81. Tavin walked back like his own legs had surprised him. Third test, manifestation stability. Myra placed her palms over a bowl and produced 5 concentric ripples, evenly spaced. Jessa formed a small square of light and held it for 12 breaths. Bram shaped a rough stone cube, not beautiful but stable. Sella spoke 1 step under her breath, then released a clean amber flame no larger than a plum. No spectacle. No collapse. Score average, 70. Fourth test, recovery discipline. This was where failed Hall used to die. Students were instructed to begin a technique, endure interference from the array, safely interrupt, name the disruption, recover, and restart. The judges expected panic. My students treated it like Tuesday. Saul failed first, smiled once, named count disruption, recovered in 9 breaths, restarted. Nemi flinched when a spectator shouted, named attention break, lowered her gaze, recovered in 11. Bram overpowered his stone shape, named angle shift, reset his hand, restarted. Iren's output remained faint, barely silver, but when the array inverted unexpectedly, he stopped before backlash, named the inversion, and signaled his group to release pressure. 3 other students followed him instantly. The chief judge leaned forward. Score, 78. Noble class recovery discipline had been 61. Corvan stopped smiling. Final test, team formation response. 5 students at a time entered a rotating pressure array. Their task was not to defeat it, not to shine, not to impress their aunties in the gallery. Stabilize for 30 breaths. Group 1 lasted 42. Group 2 lasted 39. Group 3, with Iren at the center, lasted 51. He did not overpower anything. His energy was the weakest in the group, but he watched the array like it was speaking to him. When Tavin's side rose too fast, Iren shifted half a step. When Myra's release thinned, he lowered his own output to reduce pull. When Nemi hesitated, he tapped the floor twice with his heel, their practiced signal for you are not being watched alone. The formation steadied. The bronze pillars hummed. The scoring mirror flashed. Team formation response, 82. For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. Then the gallery erupted. Not all cheers, some disbelief, some outrage, some laughter. The uncomfortable sound powerful people make when reality interrupts hierarchy. The chief judge stood. Failed disciple hall has exceeded noble class in control, recovery discipline, team formation response, and stability under pressure. 4 categories. We only needed 3. The mirror flashed again, brighter. Probationary hall continuity clause triggered. External review required. I looked at Dean Corvan. For the first time since I had woken in that classroom, he looked afraid. Not guilty. Afraid. There is a difference. Guilty people regret what they did. Afraid people regret being caught. The chief judge turned toward the administration canopy. Dean Corvan, all resource ledgers, remediation records, and hall budget accounts for failed disciple hall are now sealed pending Sect Education Council review. Pell dropped his ink brush. Leah went pale. My students looked at me. I did not grin. I did not bow dramatically. I simply opened the gray portfolio box Iren had carried into the arena and placed 17 student progress folders on the evidence table. Chief Judge, I said, we have copies. Panic has a smell. At Silver Branch Academy, it smelled like hot jade, spilled ink, and noble perfume turning sour in afternoon heat. The moment the external review seal activated, 3 golden talismans flew from the scoring mirror and attached themselves to the administration canopy, the records tower, and Dean Corvan's personal seal case. The academy had old magic built for exactly this situation. Not because the founders were saints. Because people have always stolen from students when they think no one important is looking. Dean Corvan tried to regain control immediately. "Chief Judge," he said, voice smooth but strained, "this is unnecessary. The clause exists for instructional review, not administrative seizure." The chief judge was an elderly woman with silver rings on every finger and absolutely no patience left in her body. "The clause states external review of all relevant conditions affecting hall performance," she said. "Resource distribution is relevant." Pell attempted to step backward. A gold talisman sealed itself to his record satchel. He froze. "Beautiful." Leo whispered something about a misunderstanding. Nobody listened. The students stood in the arena, unsure whether they were allowed to celebrate. That hurt more than I expected. They had spent so long bracing for punishment that victory felt like a trick. I turned to them. "You passed," I said. Saul blinked. "All of us." "All of you." Nemi covered her mouth. Tavin sat down hard on the arena floor. Bram looked toward the noble gallery, then away, as if he had just realized he no longer needed their faces to define him. Irene remained standing beside the portfolio box. His hands shook only after he set it down. The external auditors arrived within 1 hour. 3 of them, black robes, white sashes, no academy insignia. They walked like people who enjoyed silence because it made liars fill it. The lead auditor, Master Vale, asked for the emergency review order. Pell provided it. Then Master Vale asked for the daily submissions Dean Corvan had demanded. Pell provided those too, each stamped by administration. That was the best part. If Corvan had left us alone, my records might have looked like personal complaints. Because he had ordered daily documentation, they became official academy evidence. Every missing pulse stone, every delayed healer appointment, every denied training yard hour, every unsuitable gift, every resource gap, every safety concern, every progress note showing students improved when instruction changed and resources were properly matched. All stamped. All archived. All his. Corvan tried the obvious defense first. Failed Hall historically underuses resources due to low student capacity. Master Vale turned a page. The ledgers show resources were marked fully delivered. Yes, administratively allocated. Marked delivered, Master Vale repeated, with receipt seals. Pell began sweating. Then came the storage audit. The missing calming incense was found in noble supplementary prep. The pulse stones were found in a private cabinet assigned to Leo Corvan. The training yard hour fees had been charged to Failed Hall and used by noble students for extra evening practice. Rice talismans had been redirected to a guest annex that did not yet officially exist. Heating stones were listed as installed in our dormitory. Our dormitory had been cold for 2 winters. The students heard that part. Their faces changed. Passing the exam had made them proud. The audit made them angry. Quietly angry, the useful kind. Corvan shifted tactics. He praised me. That was when I nearly laughed. Mentor Noor's unusual methods have produced promising results, he said to the auditors. Naturally, as dean, I encouraged innovation under controlled pressure. I let the silence stretch. Then I placed his written notices on the table. The muddy courtyard reassignment. The final slot assignment. The advanced materials, receipt with safety concerns. The lack of confirmation. The threat he had made in front of Irene. Master Vale read each document without expression. Mentor Noor, he said, did the dean provide instructional support? No. Did he provide requested resources? No. Did he interfere with preparation? Yes. Corvan's gaze snapped to me. I kept my voice calm. He reassigned us to unsuitable space, denied appropriate materials, sent unsafe advanced supports, demanded excessive daily documentation, and scheduled us in the least favorable examination slot. Leo burst out, They passed anyway. Every auditor looked at him. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Master Vale said, "That does not improve your uncle's position." The Academy Council convened an emergency hearing before sunset. Public, because the exam had triggered public clause review. Corvan had wanted humiliation for us in the arena. He received a hearing in the same place instead. Consequences should always appreciate symmetry. Students, instructors, families, and sect elders remained in the galleries. The scoring mirror, still active, displayed 3 columns: noble class scores, failed hall scores, and resource discrepancies. No one could look away. Corvan stood before the council, with Pell and Leo behind him. I stood with 17 students in gray. Master Vale presented findings in a dry voice. Misallocation of hall resources over 2 years. False delivery seals on 14 quarterly ledgers. Unauthorized use of failed hall training fees. Nepotistic planning for dormitory reassignment prior to lawful hall closure. Interference with remediation under dismissal order. Retaliatory scheduling. Improper resource substitution. Suppression of healer referrals. Each charge landed without drama. That made it worse. Corvan asked to speak privately. Denied. He offered to restore all resources immediately. Too late. He offered to personally sponsor failed halls next term. Absolutely not. Then he looked at me. Not at the students he had tried to erase. At me. "Mentor Noor," he said, voice low enough to sound intimate and high enough for everyone to hear. "Surely we can resolve this professionally. You have proven your point. I can recommend you for senior instructor rank." There it was. The offer. The little bridge built out of stolen wood. I folded my hands. Dean Corvan, my point was never that I deserved promotion. His eyes narrowed. My point was that students deserve instruction before judgment. A murmur moved through the arena. He tried one last smile. "And if I apologize?" I looked at the 17 gray-robed students behind me. At Saul, who had learned to count without fear. At Myra, whose pain had been praised as talent. At Bram, who had been called violent when he needed consistency. At Nemi, who had been treated as weak because watching eyes froze her breath. At Irene, who had seen everything because no one had bothered to see him. Then I looked back at Corvan. "Apologies are for harm you admit," I said. "Consequences are for harm you planned." Dean Corvan lost his seal at 6th bell. Not permanently at first. Powerful men rarely fall in one clean motion. They descend by procedure, step by step, each stare labeled with something boring like pending inquiry. But that evening, in front of the academy, Master Vale suspended his budget authority, froze his administrative accounts, and removed him from all student placement decisions. Pell was placed under oath review. Leo lost access to Noble's supplementary prep before the cushions in his future annex had even arrived. A tragedy, truly. I tried to contain my grief. The council ordered immediate restoration of failed hall resources. Not next term, not after review, immediate. By 9th bell, workers carried pulse stones, heating stones, rice talismans, clean mats, stabilizing rings, and 3 boxes of proper calming incense to our dormitory. The same staff who had ignored the hall for years suddenly moved very quickly when auditors watched. Funny how that works. The students followed the supplies like suspicious cats. When the first heating stone glowed in the dormitory stove, Sella touched the warm wall and began crying silently. No one teased her. Bram stood guard near the door as if warmth might try to escape. I signed receipt forms carefully. Every item counted. Every seal checked. Trauma makes excellent auditors, unfortunately. The next morning, the academy announced our class promotion. Not to noble class. That would have been absurd and politically impossible. We became Foundation Hall. A new designation for students requiring structured skill development before specialization. It sounded bland. I adored it. Failed Hall's gray robes were replaced with dark green trim, still modest, still simple, but no longer marked for disposal. The students pretended not to care, and then spent 40 minutes adjusting sleeves. Irene received the highest formation analysis note in his cohort, not highest score overall, not a miracle transformation, something better, an official recognition of the skill he actually had. Observation and formation response aptitude, exceptional. He read that line 5 times. Then he asked if it was a clerical error. I said, "No, Irene, some people are good at seeing." He looked down for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. Corvan tried to bargain again, on the second day, after the exam. This time he came without robes of office. His silver trim was gone. The jade clasp remained, but even that seemed embarrassed to be there. He found me in the restored training yard, where the students were practicing basic drills with new mats and suspiciously intense respect for inventory management. "You have what you wanted," he said. "Do I?" "Your students are promoted. Your hall is funded. My authority is suspended." "All true." He stepped closer. "The council inquiry does not need to become criminal." There it was. The real ask. Not apology, not repair. Containment. I looked at him for a while. In another kind of story, maybe I would have enjoyed his fear more. Maybe I would have made some grand speech. Maybe lightning would crack behind me and a hidden bloodline would awaken just to underline the moment. But I was a teacher, so I told the truth. "You stole from children who trusted this academy." His mouth tightened. Resources were redistributed based on potential. "No," I said. "They were redirected based on proximity to your nephew." His face hardened at that. "Good. Truth should bruise where lies have been leaning." "I can make your career difficult," he said. "No," I said. "You could have, before you put every decision in writing." Behind him, the students had gone still. Irene moved closer, not enough to interrupt, enough to witness. Corvan noticed him this time. "Too late." "You think this academy will protect you forever?" Corvan asked me. "No." That surprised him. I smiled faintly. "I think records will protect the students long enough for them to learn how to protect themselves." He had no answer to that. People like Corvan understand power as possession. Titles, budgets, access, family names, they struggle with power that spreads. A student who can name their own error becomes harder to shame. A class that understands rules becomes harder to cheat. A teacher who documents becomes harder to erase. After he left, Bram asked if I was worried. "Yes," I said. He blinked. "You admit that?" "I am brave, not stupid." Myra laughed so hard she nearly dropped her water bowl. The inquiry lasted 12 days. During that time, more came out. Former failed hall students returned with stories. One had been expelled after healer referrals were delayed until her meridian damage worsened. One had paid for replacement pulse stones that had already been funded. One had been told his family must donate to avoid dismissal. 3 had left cultivation entirely. The council expanded the investigation. Corvan's family distanced themselves publicly by day 4, privately by day 2, and financially by day 1, according to Irene, who had developed a terrifying interest in administrative gossip. Pell confessed to stamping false deliveries under Dean instruction. Leo claimed ignorance, which was believable in the narrow sense that he had never seemed burdened by knowledge. He was removed from academy housing and reassigned to a remote branch as an unpaid probationary clerk. I wish the remote branch strength. On day 13, the final judgment was read. Dean Corvan was stripped of rank, banned from academy administration for 10 years, fined 4,800 spirit stones, and ordered to repay misallocated student resources with interest. His name was removed from the Silver Branch donor wall. That last part hurt him visibly. Vanity is often more sensitive than conscience. The academy avoided collapse by doing what institutions always do when caught. It discovered sudden enthusiasm for reform. A teaching methods review committee appeared. A student support ledger was announced. External audits would occur every 2 years. And most unexpectedly, the council asked me to present my methods. I said no. Then I said yes with conditions. Not because I wanted to help the academy polish its image. I did not. But because there were other halls, other students, other instructors who had inherited terrible systems and called them tradition because nobody had offered language for anything better. My conditions were simple. Students, names anonymized. No method sold to noble families first. Foundation hall protected for 3 years. Iren appointed paid junior observer. Every resource claim tied to visible student need. The council argued for 6 hours. I brought documentation. They agreed in one. The first official lecture on structured cultivation training took place in the same classroom where I had woken with the dismissal order in my hand. I stood at the front with chalk dust on my fingers and 17 students sitting straighter than they had any reason to. The cracked mats were gone. The paper windows had been replaced. The incense burner finally worked, though I used it sparingly because half the academy seemed to think incense could substitute for planning. It could not. 23 instructors attended. 7 came out of curiosity. 9 came because the council ordered them. 4 came to prove I was a fraud. 3 came because they had quietly been trying to help weak students for years and looked so tired that I wanted to give them chairs, tea, and possibly revenge. I began with a reed tube and a bell. That annoyed the arrogant ones immediately. Good. I demonstrated how Tavin had learned output control, not by being told to be gentler, which is not feedback, by narrowing the task, creating an external sound marker, reducing force, repeating in short intervals, and measuring consistency. Then Myra showed pressure, rerouting with water ripples. Saul explained breath grouping. Nemi demonstrated gaze anchoring. Bram showed hand angle correction with chalk marks, looking furious about being impressive. Jessa described pre-step whispering as a temporary support, then explained how she had reduced it from 6 spoken steps to 2 silent cues. Iren presented observation mapping. He was pale before he began. Then he looked at the slate, looked at the room, and became precise. He explained trigger patterns, environmental variables, and partner feedback loops with such quiet clarity that even the skeptical instructors stopped shifting in their seats. The interface hovered beside me, updating silently. Foundation hall, class identity stabilized. Instructor pathway emerging. New cultivation art classification possible. Pedagogic formation guidance. I stared at that line. Teaching as a cultivation art. In this world, arts had names. Sword arts, flame arts, beast arts, pill arts, formation arts, healing arts. Teaching had been treated as a duty, a punishment, a stepping stone, or a place to hide weaker cultivators. Not an art. Not a discipline. Not a path. But what was cultivation, if not change through repeated practice? What was instruction, if not shaping the conditions of transformation? I did not say that dramatically, because I have dignity, and also because dramatic phrasing makes committees excited in dangerous ways. Instead, I said, a beginner does not fail because they need help. A beginner fails when help is treated as evidence they should never have begun. The room went very still. After the lecture, one of the older instructors approached me. Her green robes were worn at the cuffs. Her eyes had the flat exhaustion of someone who had been right for too long without backup. I have a student who cannot visualize flame, she said quietly, but she can feel heat patterns through stone. I smiled, then stopped teaching her flame through sight. The instructor stared. Then she laughed once, sharp and disbelieving, like a locked door had opened somewhere in her chest. That was when I understood the real revenge was bigger than Corvan. Corvan was one man, greedy, cruel, ordinary. The deeper enemy was the idea that only obvious talent deserved careful teaching. I had hated that idea on Earth. I hated it more with spiritual energy attached. Months passed. Foundation Hall did not become legendary overnight. I refused to let anyone write that lie. Some students still struggled. Sella's damaged root required healer support. Oren needed twice as many retrieval cycles as others. Bram still got angry when embarrassed. Myra still overreached when praised too loudly. Tavin still had days when force felt safer than control. But now those were problems with plans, not verdicts. By winter, all 17 advanced to second stage foundation stability. By spring, 5 entered specialized tracks. Myra joined water regulation. Tavin joined defensive arts, where his control made him terrifyingly reliable. Nemi entered illusion resistance, because a girl who had learned to function while watched understood attention better than most masters. Bram became shockingly good at construction formations. Saul chose theory support and began designing memory chants that everyone pretended not to like while using constantly. And Aren stayed. Not as a failed student. As junior observer of Foundation Hall, paid with an official stipend and given access to formation archives. He still sat near windows. He still noticed everything. Sometimes, when the classroom emptied, he would leave a slate on my desk with notes I had not asked for but needed. The left side pillar hum distracts new students. Master Halen says, simple like an insult, watch his group. New girl in back row understands rhythm through foot tapping, not breath count. I kept every slate. My private interface changed too. It never became omnipotent. It still could not cultivate for anyone. It still could not promise outcomes. It still needed observation, evidence, time, and effort. But as my students grew, so did my own core. Slowly, quietly, every time I designed a practice sequence that reduced confusion, a thin thread of spiritual energy settled into my meridians. Every time feedback helped a student correct safely, my core warmed. Every time a class moved from chaos to shared understanding, the air around me steadied. My cultivation path was not sword light or thunder flame. It was structure, scaffolding, attention, the boring fundamentals. The academy eventually named it Instructional Cultivation. I hated the name for 3 weeks, then accepted that committees should be allowed only limited creativity. They offered me senior rank after the first year. I accepted the title, not the office. The office had thick carpets and no students nearby. Suspicious. They offered me Corvan's old quarters. I refused. Foundation Hall needed storage space. That annoyed several administrators, which confirmed it was the correct decision. As for Corvan, he left Silver Branch before the first snow. No dramatic exile, no chains, no screaming. Just a former dean stepping into a hired carriage with fewer servants than he arrived with, while the donor wall inside the academy displayed a clean pale rectangle where his name had been. Leo lasted 4 months at the remote branch before resigning to pursue private opportunities. I wished those opportunities robust supervision. Pell became a cautionary example in registrar training. I approved. The dismissal order stayed in my desk. Not framed, I am not that theatrical. Folded, preserved, red seal cracked. Sometimes new students asked why I kept it. I told them the truth. Because 30 days is long enough to destroy people when nobody teaches them properly, I said, and long enough to save them when someone finally does. The day Foundation Hall's second cohort arrived, 21 students stood in the classroom wearing gray-trimmed robes, frightened and defensive and already ashamed. I looked at their files. Weak output, poor stillness, unstable circulation, low theory retention, failed noble placement, damaged root, anxiety response, slow gathering, excessive force. Labels, not destinies. The interface opened beside my vision. New class group detected. Confusion tracking available. I picked up the chalk. Before we begin, I said, no one in this room is allowed to confuse being behind with being broken. A few students blinked. One cried immediately, which disrupted my packing but improved my faith in humanity. Irene stood at the side with a slate, pretending not to smile. And I thought about the woman whose body I had inherited. Noor Alaris, who had survived 3 years of being dismissed. Noor, who had cared enough to stay in a doomed hall even before I arrived. Noor, who had been called weak because she did not have the power to fight openly. I hoped, wherever her soul had gone, she knew we had kept her students. No. Our students. I had crossed worlds with no sword, no bloodline, and no prophecy. I had been given a classroom, a countdown, and a group of teenagers everyone had already thrown away. In the end, that was enough. Because I did not transmigrate into power. I transmigrated into responsibility, and I made the heavens sit through a proper lesson plan.